Hello and welcome back to the church we dream of. My name is Kia Gutierrez. I'm a marriage and family therapist and church leader based out of Olympia, Washington. If you are just arriving here, it may be because I am releasing my debut full length work, Emotions as Messengers, tomorrow. This is a behind the scenes full reveal. Like, look, do you see this? It says not for resale. So this was my draft to get all of this better. It's ready for you to read. And today we're going to talk about why did I write it and what are you going to get out of it if you read it. So thank you so much for taking the time to be curious, because I believe that is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And this book talks about that. Up front, if you're just looking for information, the book is coming out on Amazon tomorrow, which is July 7th, 2026, which is also my 35th birthday. So as my birthday present to myself, I'm giving you all a book. Happy birthday to us. It's available exclusively on Amazon because a lot of the things that we want to do in life, a lot of our dreams, they're hard to get to. There's a lot of barriers. So for this project, one of the parameters was everything had to be free. Like everything that I put into this had to be a free resource. I wanted to see what we could do together with just like the bare minimum, right? What can we do with the bare minimum? And so that's what this is. Go order your copy. If you really like it, leave a review, share it with a friend, and let's talk about why. Let's talk about why it's important that more than just you and me know about this book. Okay, so at the very end of the book, actually, in the very last chapter, We Were Made for This, I tell a story about something that happened when I was 18 years old. And so this conversation is going to pick up right after that. Sorry, you have to read that story to find out where we're at. What we're going to pick up today is about 6 to 8 months after that. Uh, I was living in Mexico and I was working at a YWAM base. And that was the moment in my life where I got the inspiration to write this book. Notice I was 19 and now I'm 35. So a couple of things have happened, but let's talk about probably not the first thing, but one of the big things that got us here. I had finished my DTS, and one of the things that I had been really nervous to do was be on a worship team. There's lots of reasons for that. But in this community, I was invited to be on the worship team. It was very healing and transformative for me. It was a very spirit-led community. So there was room for me to hear the voice of God and then go in that direction during worship and lead people in that way. And it wasn't something that I had experience in. It was something that I was learning, but I really enjoyed that opportunity. So one morning, I felt the Lord guide me into singing a song about rest. It was really beautiful because at the time, I don't know if you know about this about missionaries, but they work very hard. They're always working. There's always something to do. There's always someone to save. There's always another project. There's maintenance. Like it's anyone in church, anyone in ministry, honestly, there's always more to do because there's never enough people to do the work. And there's always more work than even if we had the appropriate team. So in this book, we're going to talk about how to figure out how to narrow your scope a little bit, not directly, but indirectly. So that morning, I led this prophetic song about rest, and it was just so beautiful to see how people responded. I was looking out into the room, and relationships were reconciling. I remember specifically there was this married couple that I really respected, and they had a beautiful marriage, but they were just having a small moment of reconciliation during this time of worship. And I could just see how much they loved each other, but how this moment of pause really brought unity back into their relationship. And it so deeply ministered to me because of where I was at in my life at that time. There was lots of other beautiful things that happened. Unfortunately, after the worship set was done, one of the leadership came up to me and very strongly and clearly communicated that I should not have led a song about rest. They were speaking from a place of hurt at that time. They were struggling with some of their own fears, and it came out on me. I didn't know that then, but I know that now. But what came out was they were really struggling with how are they going to financially provide for this ministry. And so they were very uncomfortable with the concept of rest. And they were frustrated because a lot of the people who I was leading in rest actually had work that they needed to be doing that wasn't getting done. And he was very stressed out about that. So he gave me this very clear direction that I should not lead people in rest ever again, which you and me listening to that now, we could go like, wow, that's not a good day. And you would be correct. It was not a good day. I did not respond well. I was 19. I was very hurt and confused. So I went back to my room and my fantastic roommate was there. And I was just pacing and verbally processing, which was a big deal for me because I was not big on being emotionally vulnerable back then. So I was being vulnerable anyway, just admitting that I was hurt. I was really angry at the time. I was very angry that I had done what I felt like I was supposed to do and followed the voice of God. And I had received criticism from the person who was encouraging me to do that thing. While I was ranting to my friend, my then boyfriend walked into the room, brand new boyfriend, and he was watching this conversation between my friend and I. And I came to the conclusion that I never wanted to feel again. I never wanted to have emotions. I actually said that. I do not want to feel. I don't like feeling. It hurts too much. I was obedient to God, and the ministry responded negatively. And I don't think I can handle that. I don't think I can do that again. And I know that for so many of you, if you've spent any time listening to me talk, you must have had a similar experience because we don't end up here by choice. We don't end up in a place where we're critical of the church, but also desperately longing to be in community with the church because everything went well. We end up in this place because we were following God's voice and then things didn't go the way we expected them to. And people hurt us along the way. We also hurt others, but we're going to talk about ourselves right now. And so when I said, I don't want to feel ever again, my friend said, well, that doesn't make any sense. You can't do that. You can't just choose not to feel. And I said, oh, yes, I can. I absolutely can. And you know what? You can. You can choose not to feel. That's 100% an option that's available to you. But I remember spinning around because I was pacing and saying, yep, I choose not to feel. I won't do it. And my eyes landed on my brand new boyfriend at the time. And the way that his spirit responded to me choosing not to feel, I still haven't figured out how to put into words, but it was something along the lines of grief and loss. He was grieving the loss of something beautiful. The fact that I wouldn't be able to feel was a loss for him because he enjoyed my emotions. And I saw that if I did that, he would still choose to be in relationship with me, but it was going to be less than what he hoped for, less than what was possible. Hear me when I say that. It's not that he was like, well, I hoped she would be more and she's not. There was this radical commitment that I saw in his spirit to me, even at that time. And he was surrendering beautifully to the fact that if I chose not to feel, that was a choice he was willing to honor, but it grieved him. And he was going to miss out on the opportunity to know me because I wasn't willing to feel. And that was something that grieved him. He was sad that he did not get to know me. For 19-year-old Kaya, that was like a crazy thought. And I hope what's coming to your mind right now is a moment where you were surprised when someone was excited to get to know you, when you experienced friendship that was better than you expected. It was kind of like that, only the person who was looking at me was my future husband. It wasn't just a boyfriend that was going to be temporary. The man looking at me and grieving the loss of the wholeness of my being, the loss of my ability to feel was my future, my greatest ministry, my marriage, the father of my children. And something in me shifted when I saw him have that wave of emotion. And it set me on a journey to discover what is the purpose of emotion and is it worth feeling it? And that has led us to my conclusion. My conclusion is yes, emotions are worth our time, but we have been severely undereducated on what emotions are and how to engage with them well. There are a lot of narratives around emotion right now, particularly. It's a very hot topic. And I have done several programs that have already been written on how to feel and what to feel. The concept of sitting with your emotions is something that I address in this book. It's something that I spent a couple of years on. Sitting with emotions. Why do we do it? Does it work? Is it worth our time? And the things that I am revealing to you are the things that I've found along the way because every program that I did, while it was helpful, while it ministered to me, absolutely changed my life, benefited me, I felt like I was missing something foundational that made the whole thing make sense. And that is the concept that I introduce here. The thing that I felt like was missing was I understand that emotions are important, but I don't understand why. I understand that feeling is a big deal, but I don't understand why. I do understand that emotions, feeling them, is a lot of work. And the desire and the pull to not feel at all is very attractive. So I needed a very compelling argument On this journey, I experienced a lot of different churches and faith communities discussing how much emotion is appropriate and how much is safe. This is big in the church. We've got it, the range of what's appropriate in emotion. Also, during this time, I was getting my master's as a marriage and family therapist and studying the psychology of emotion and how it works in the body. And I think that was when everything clicked for me, was the psychology of emotion it's so incredibly spiritual. The psychology of emotion cannot be separated from a spiritual experience. And I actually chose a master's program that was not faith-based because I wanted to hear from the body. I wanted to learn from science because I believe that whatever we discover in science is a reflection of the character and nature and the wisdom of God because he created all things. So they're not separated to me. So I wanted to learn from science without the filter of the church of what's appropriate and what isn't, what challenges who God is and what doesn't. And instead, I just wanted to let the world speak. I just wanted to let the data speak. It's kind of comparable to going into the mountains and just looking and seeing God's beautiful. You don't need someone to tell you, you experience it. So I was studying what has the world experienced about emotions that can lead me and will lead me back to scripture. And what I discovered, I summarized this way, is that emotions are messages from God. I want to read part of how I explain this from chapter 1. This is chapter 1, page 5. An emotion is a chemical process that takes place inside you. When you experience something, see something, remember something, perceive a threat or a gift or a loss, your brain begins to release a cascade of neurochemicals and hormones: cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine, oxytocin. These chemicals travel through your bloodstream and your nervous system and produce what we recognize as a feeling: the tightening in the chest, the heat in the face, the sudden looseness in the limbs, the flood of warmth toward another person, as well as the motivation to do something. Emotions are your body's language. They are the way your nervous system translates your experience of the world into information you can actually use to make choices. If you believe there is a creator God, then God designed this system. He built into the architecture of the human body a biological process that generates physical, embodied responses to the world around us, responses specifically designed to give us data, to alert us to what is happening, to orient us towards something that needs our attention. Your emotions are not a glitch. They are not a design flaw that crept in later. They are part of the original blueprint. Emotions are messages from God that show us his plan for our lives and the purpose of our existence. And they keep us on the path towards connection and expanding the kingdom of heaven. In this book, I address the fact that as a church, that's not the narrative that we've been given. And in psychology, it's not the narrative that we've been given. There is a fine line right in the middle that I walk on this book between listening to your emotions and letting them run your life and not listening to your emotions at all. There is this line in the middle that I believe is holy and designed by God to help us fulfill our purpose. We can see pretty quickly, looking around our relationships and our world, that line is, one, not being walked, and two, we don't know how to. In chapter 2, I talk about why. It's not an education issue. It's an attachment issue. I specialize in trauma-informed couples communication. So that means I've spent the last 5 years, 6 years, I don't know, studying how does trauma interrupt our attempts to connect with one another, specifically in the way that we communicate with each other. And in this book, I talk about the role that emotions play in our communication. Remember, in the story, I chose not to feel. That is a trauma response. I experienced something with a leader that made me feel like I wasn't connected or wanted. That attachment to that discipleship figure was broken. And as a result, I chose to cut off the thing that was making it possible for me to connect with them in the first place. And that was feeling emotions. All of us, in all of our relationships, have something that we've experienced that's painful, that emotion encourages us to do, but the response to that action was painful. So at some point, we chose to cut off that emotion. You don't have to cut all emotion out at once. You can actually be selective. You can choose, I'm just not going to choose this. I won't feel this or I won't feel that. On a certain level, you can do that. However, emotions are like tied together in a network in your brain. So if you cut off one, you're going to reduce another one as well. And this is a big deal when it comes to talking about joy. If you cut out grief, you're going to have less joy. And that's just science. It's not spiritual, it's science. So what I talk about in chapter 2 is something that I call the redacted message. I give my theological argument for what's happening. What is the body telling us is happening when we have traumatic experiences in our brain? So let's read a little bit out of chapter 2. This is page 18. What did Jesus save us from? It is time to come back and answer the question from chapter 1. If Jesus is the Savior, what did he save us from and how did he do it? One reading suggests that Jesus saves us from death. But what is death? According to Genesis, death entered the story as a consequence of taking on the role of judge. The way I read it, death is a kind of kindness, a promise that we will not endure the suffering of being an insufficient judge forever. Death is a temporary solution to a bigger problem, the distortion of humanity's relationship with God, a feeling of being disconnected from Him based on our own judgment. There's backstory, so if you're like, I'm not totally sure what she's talking about, that's why you need to read chapter 1. So just stick with me. When Jesus, God in the flesh, came to earth, it is not just a theological event, but a pattern for how healing happens. God did not heal humanity from a distance. He did not send a more sophisticated explanation of why things were broken. He entered the body. He entered the nervous system. He got close enough to touch the leper, to weep at the graveside, to take the hand of the little girl everyone else had already given up on. He came to us. That is the thing that the footnote says will not happen. No one is coming. But Jesus did come. And more than that, he fulfilled the role of justice. What is the redacted message? I want to let you read the chapter and figure that out. The first 3 chapters really build together to make a huge reframe, the science and theology of emotion. So then we get to chapter 3, where we talk about connection in relationships, and we talk specifically about shame, and that's the intercepted message. So even if we manage to connect to ourselves and our bodies and our emotions, even if we manage to connect to God and have an emotional relationship with Him that is guided by walking the line in between not feeling and feeling without logic, there's still a third piece that we need. And I think this is where, as a church community, we really struggle. And even as a psychology community, we struggle. I specialize in systemic therapy, which means I was trained from the beginning to think about not just the person sitting in front of me, but everyone in their lives as well. So whether I'm doing individual therapy or couples therapy, I'm not just thinking about the one person in the room. I'm thinking about their closest relationships, their family members, the society they live in, the cultural implications, like literally everything. Everything, because you can't experience anything in a vacuum of individuality. That is an illusion. So every emotion that you feel is not just an experience for you. It is part of a collective whole. And so I think what gets sticky is sometimes we see emotions as an isolated individual experience where we think, oh, this is about me. And so if it's only about me, 1, it's the most important thing, or 2, it doesn't matter at all. Neither one of those is true. In the middle is emotion is about connecting you to other people. And we talk about that in chapter 3 using attachment theory and the concept of shame. Let's read a little bit of chapter 3 and what I say about shame. This is from page 23, where shame comes from. Shame is not baked into how God created humans. Many of us have absorbed the idea that shame is the appropriate response to being human. It is the correct posture before a holy God. That feeling bad about who we are is somehow the same as being humble. It is not. Shame entered the story at the same moment that everything else broke. Before the fall, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. This is not an incidental detail. The author is trying to tell us something about the original condition. This is a different version of the final, so there's like typos. I'm like, what? Okay. The author is trying to tell us something about the original condition. Full exposure, full visibility, nothing hidden, no fear of what would be seen, no managing the impression, no performance. They were fully known by each other and fully at ease in that knowing. The original human community was a community without secrets. So we talk more about that. But the thing that I really want you to take away from this initial conversation about emotions as messengers, a faith-based guide to understanding your emotions, reconnecting with God, yourself, and others, is that it's taken me 15 years of a personal walk with emotions to come up with this theory that made me feel like emotions are, one, not only worth feeling, two, they're the most efficient and practical way to facilitate relationship, healthy community, and honestly, any sort of project that you want to accomplish, any impact that you want to have in the world, anything that you want to see change in the world will start with the ability to hear and understand our emotions and respond accordingly. The first three things that we cover are, one, our current relationship with emotions, two, God's original design for emotions, and three, how our current relationship with emotions is negatively impacting our relationships. We lay out the problem in the first three chapters. In the next podcast, I'm going to talk about how to hear the emotion. And then in the third one, we'll talk about what do we do with the message. So we're going to do that. But for today, I want to encourage you and plant a seed of doubt and curiosity because there are so many curriculums on feeling emotion. Trust me, I'm aware. I has studied them. And I wouldn't offer this to you if I didn't feel like it was a fundamental missing piece. I don't think this replaces all the other curriculums. So what I do is offer a reframe on a lot of the tools that were already being taught to use that for me made them more accessible. It reframes emotions as messages from God. If something in my body is talking to me about what God thinks and feels, that is worth my time. My life experience has taught me that it's the most efficient piece of data to get me to my goal. Since I hopefully finished, I really hope that typo that I just saw is not actually in there because I'm going to have to fix it. Since wrapping up the majority of writing this, I've been putting into practice on a more intentional and deeper level everything that I talk about in this book. And I have been transformed again, if you will. In this book, I talk about a moment that changed my life in the final chapter. And it was such an incredible moment of healing. I don't know that I've ever experienced a healing of that intensity since then, since I was 18. Not that kind of instant transformation. A lot of the healing in my life has been slow, walk it out healing since then, which is beautiful, important. We talk about it. But since putting the practices of this book into play, and the particular season of life that I am in, I do believe that I encountered a second equally transformative moment of healing that I believe I will be walking out for the next 10 to 15 years that has completely changed my life. Something in me has been healed that I have been wrestling with. There is things that we have been wrestling with that almost feel counter to our callings, counter to the things that we know to be true. We know that God's called us to X, Y, and Z. We know that this is right, but we feel the other way and we can't get out of that. And since I have been reading my own book, I have experienced the healing that bridges the gap that only God can do, that is completely supernatural in the sense that it is 100% natural. He built into our bodies the ability to heal. So whether you want to call that a supernatural healing or neuroplasticity, in my mind, they're the same. As a generation, we've been through some stuff with the church, but we're not giving up. Clearly, we're not giving up. And I think that's one of the things that I see with clients sometimes that really frustrates me is the situation they're in is really terrible, but they won't give up. And I'm like, you could just leave and start over, you don't have to do this. You don't have to stay here. But they're just stubborn. They refuse to give up. And I think for many of us, our relationship with the church, our relationship with God is like that. We've been hurt, but we refuse to give up. We cannot give up hope. This was born out of, okay, now what then? What do we do with irrational hope that isn't just continue to suffer, that isn't just maintain the status quo, that isn't, well, this is all there is, so we're just going to do that. If we were all to follow the simple steps in this book, everything would fall apart. In the best way. I'm walking this out. I do feel like there are things in my life that are falling apart, but it's the kind of falling apart that is absolutely peaceful, where you feel at home, where you feel the restlessness come to peace. The restlessness shifts. And I want that for you. I know that God's doing big things in your life. I know that there's emotions that you have that don't make sense and they feel contradictory to your calling. And I want to invite you into a journey that I am also on of reconciling that contradiction and moving forward with confidence and efficiency. As of tomorrow morning, you can officially purchase your copy, read it, let me know what you think, start the journey with me. Let's do this thing. What's the worst that could happen? And you know what? What's the best that could happen? The best that could happen is that our personal lives, our relationship with God, our families become transformed in a way that we only dreamed was possible. And that as a result, we come together in community and build a church that we feel like is a beautiful representation of the kingdom of heaven because we have the capacity to do it, because we're no longer resisting our emotion, but letting us lead us directly down the path that God has called us to. Okay, I'm sure you have questions. Read the book, get the answers. The next episode, we'll unpack the middle, where we're going to talk about the 7 primary emotions. Okay, no more spoilers. I'll see you soon.